You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, saving you time and money. With Vanta, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber for $1,000 off Vanta. AI regulations move forward in California. DDoS attacks are on the rise. CISA releases a joint cybersecurity advisory on the RansomHub ransomware. A persistent malware campaign has been targeting Roblox developers. 2 European men are indicted for orchestrating a widespread swatting campaign. Critical vulnerabilities in an enterprise network monitoring solution could lead to system compromise. An Ohio judge issues a restraining order against a cybersecurity expert following a ransomware attack. Our guest is Dr. Zulfikar Ramzan, chief scientist at Aura, sharing his take on AI's growing role with online criminals. And Admiral Hopper's lost lecture is lost no more. It's Friday, August 30th, 2024. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is your CyberWire Intel Briefing. Happy Friday, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. California's efforts to establish groundbreaking safety regulations for large-scale AI systems advanced this week, with a proposal passing a key vote in the Assembly. The bill, authored by Senator Scott Wiener, aims to mitigate risks associated with AI, such as the potential for catastrophic misuse, by requiring companies to test their models and disclose safety protocols. Despite fierce opposition from major tech firms like OpenAI, Google, and Meta, as well as some lawmakers, the measure narrowly passed and now awaits a final Senate vote before reaching Governor Gavin Newsom. The bill, which targets AI systems requiring over $100 million in data for training, represents a light-touch approach, according to Weiner. Supporters argue it's a necessary step to prevent AI-related disasters, while critics contend it's based on unrealistic fears and could stifle innovation. The outcome of this legislation could set a precedent for AI regulation across the U.S. A report by Radware highlights a significant rise in distributed denial of service attacks, with some lasting up to 100 hours over 6 days. Notably, a recent web DDoS attack campaign involved 10 waves, each lasting 4 to 20 hours, peaking at 4.7 million requests per second. The first quarter of 2024 saw a 137% increase in DDoS attacks, with new methods like HTTP2 rapid reset contributing to this surge. Attackers are increasingly using cloud infrastructure, such as Telegram, to launch attacks, avoiding reliance on compromised IoT devices. Most attacks targeted organizations in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa due to regional conflicts and events like the Paris 2024 Olympics. Additionally, malicious DNS queries and web application attacks have surged, while bad bot transactions rose by 61% year over year. CISA, in collaboration with the FBI, the MSISAC, and HHS, has released a joint cybersecurity advisory on the RansomHub ransomware, formerly known as Cyclops and Knight. The advisory provides indicators of compromise, tactics, techniques, and procedures, and detection methods related to RansomHub, identified through recent FBI investigations. RansomHub, a ransomware as a service variant, has attracted affiliates from other major ransomware groups like Lockbit and Alpha. CISA urges network defenders to review the advisory and implement the recommended mitigations. Additionally, CISA has launched the CISA Services Portal, a streamlined platform for reporting cyber incidents, as it prepares for new mandatory reporting requirements under the upcoming Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, CIRCIA. The portal offers enhanced features, including the ability to save, update, and share reports, and integrates with login.gov credentials. While incident reporting is currently voluntary, CIRCIA will soon require organizations in critical infrastructure sectors to report major cyber incidents within 72 hours. CISA is upgrading its technology and expanding its workforce to handle the expected increase in incident reports, aiming to make the process as efficient and non-burdensome as possible for affected organizations. A persistent malware campaign has been targeting Roblox developers through malicious NPM packages, according to a report from Checkmarks. Since August 2023, attackers have been publishing packages that mimic the popular noblocks.js library to steal sensitive data and compromise systems. Despite multiple takedowns, new malicious packages continue to appear. The attackers use techniques like brand jacking, combo squatting, and star jacking to create the illusion of legitimacy. The malware's capabilities include Discord token theft, system persistence, and deploying additional payloads like Quasar Rat. The malicious code, hidden in the postinstall.js file, is heavily obfuscated and automatically executes when the package is installed. The malware manipulates the Windows registry to ensure it runs consistently and exfiltrates sensitive data to the attackers via a Discord webhook. Despite efforts to remove these packages, the attacker's GitHub repository remains active, posing an ongoing threat. Developers are advised to verify package authenticity to avoid such attacks. Two European men, Tomasz Szabo from Romania and Nemanja Radovanovic from Serbia, were indicted for orchestrating a widespread swatting campaign that targeted around 100 people, including a former U.S. president, members of Congress, and other public officials. The campaign, which spanned from December 2020 through January 2024, involved making fake emergency calls to prompt aggressive police response at the victims' homes. The swatting calls included threats of mass shootings, bombings, and other violent acts. Szabo and Radovanovic used various techniques to appear legitimate and coordinated their attacks through online chat groups. They're charged with conspiracy and numerous counts of making threats. The FBI reported a surge in swatting calls, some linked to court cases against former President Donald Trump. U.S. officials are expected to seek the extradition of both men to face trial. Critical vulnerabilities in Progress Software's WhatsUp Gold, an enterprise network monitoring solution, could lead to system compromise. The software, essential for monitoring cloud and on-premise infrastructure, has over 1,200 instances accessible online, many potentially affected by a severe flaw with a CVSS score of 9.8. The vulnerability allows remote code execution due to improper input validation in the getFileWithoutZip method. Although a patch was released in May with version 23.1.3 and another in August with version 24.0.0, upgrading requires a manual process that may deter some administrators. The vulnerability has not been exploited yet, but the availability of proof-of-concept code makes it crucial for administrators to update to the latest version to avoid potential exploitation. Progress Software strongly advises upgrading to protect systems from unauthorized access and other risks. A judge in Franklin County, Ohio, has issued a temporary restraining order against cybersecurity expert David L. Ross, Jr., who's been revealing the impact of a ransomware attack on Columbus city government. Ross, also known as Connor Goodwolf, alerted the public that sensitive information, including social security numbers and details about crime victims and police officers, was stolen and posted online after the city refused to pay a ransom. The order prohibits Ross from accessing or sharing these files. Ross argues that the city is trying to deflect blame for its own mishandling of the breach, while the city claims the order is necessary to protect public safety. Despite the restraining order, Ross plans to pursue legal action, claiming his First Amendment rights are being infringed. The situation has led to multiple lawsuits against the city for failing to protect personal data. Coming up after the break, Dr. Zulfikar Ramzan, chief scientist at ARA, shares his take on AI's growing role with online criminals. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. It's all connected, and we're not talking conspiracy theories. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. The same should be true for security awareness training. KnowBe4, provider of the world's largest library of security awareness training, provides a way to integrate your existing security stack tools to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and Cisco, 35 vendor integrations and counting. Security Coach analyzes your security stack alerts to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. Use this information to set up real-time coaching campaigns targeting risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. Then coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. Learn more at knowbefore.com/securitycoach. That's knowbefore.com/securitycoach. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business. Dr. Zulfikar Ramzan is chief scientist at Aura. I recently spoke with him about his take on AI's growing role with online criminals.
The short of it is that Rocky 2024 is, at this point, the largest single password compilation leak in history, comprising about 10 billion unique plain text passwords. It is not a unique file on its own. It's got a long history, dating back actually to about 2009, I believe. There was a website called RockU, and that particular website was compromised by a SQL injection attack that led to about 32 million or so passwords getting compromised. And then based on that initial compromise, people have essentially kept adding to this one file and added more and more passwords. And most notably, in 2021, there was a file called Rocky 2021, which contained about, I think, 8.4 billion passwords. And so this latest incarnation of RockU is now 2024, contains an additional 1.6 billion passwords, getting us to about roughly 10 billion passwords. And that's kind of the gist of it.
I guess it's not surprising that someone out there would be keeping a running tally of all of the accumulated passwords that have been vacuumed up over the years. But what is the real world significance of this sort of assembly of all of these passwords?
For a scammer, what it basically entails is having access to a wide variety of passwords makes it easy to mount various kinds of attacks. The most notable attack is credential stuffing. That basically entails a scammer using tools and techniques for taking these large collections of passwords and essentially trying to brute force access to different accounts and different services using those passwords. And so what they'll try to do is they'll say, if I can get this password for you, can I try this password on different sites until I finally find something that matches or works? The tools and techniques for doing that fall under the concept of credential stuffing, which is probably the single most relevant attack implication of these types of attacks. In general, though, once you have access to passwords, you can start to do things like dictionary attacks on other password lists. So, for example, if I can get a list of hash passwords for a compromised site, I can essentially cross-reference that list of hash passwords against the ROCU list to see if there are any matches. And that would require me essentially computing hashes in one direction to identify similarities or exact matches. And if that happens, then I can go ahead and use those passwords and try to log in as you. And so in general, it just increases the exposure for the average person when it comes to their protection on various websites and services.
You know, we've all been sort of captivated by this revolution we've seen in AI. Does having those sorts of AI tools make a password cache like this even more valuable?
Certainly. I think one thing we are seeing with AI is the increase of automation and improving the way these attacks have taken place. Now, having said that, I mean, the reality is that threat actors have been using automation for decades. They've been using automation in the context of coming up with new malware samples that don't fit under the paradigms of signatures of previous types of detection capabilities. We have seen the use of AI for doing automated attack creation, for identifying vulnerabilities, etc. But in general, those areas of AI applications have been, in many cases, preceded by a long history of automation tools in these areas. What I think right now is really unique with the use of AI in the concept of attacks is in areas like misinformation. So things like deep fakes. That comes up over and over again. Social engineering historically has been the single most common vector for being able to get through and get past the defenses of organizations. And deep fakes in particular only up the ante, make it a lot more tricky and difficult for the average person to navigate correctly.
Is this presenting opportunities, this AI revolution? I mean, for consumers themselves, you know, we hear about how the bad guys are making use of these tools. I mean, this is something you and your colleagues are working on as well, right? To bring this to the protection side of the equation.
Absolutely. I mean, we have been laser focused on the application of AI in the context of defense in cybersecurity. This area, by the way, is again not new. The first applications of AI that I was involved with date back to about 2010 in production environments, protecting millions of people. But in many cases, what we've seen is that trying to solve the vast panoply of cybersecurity problems manually, trying to keep up with the latest threats and variations on these threats is impossible to do if you're approaching the problem manually. And historically, that's how we approached it. We would look for different kinds of threats. We'd identify their characteristics. We develop signatures for those threats, and then we would look for those signatures or variations on those signatures in the real world to prevent people from getting and becoming victims. Nowadays, as we all know, the number of threat variations has gotten so high, the number of different creative endeavors that attackers have engaged in have gotten so complex and so intricate that trying to solve these problems using manual methods has really taken its toll. It no longer is the right way to approach the problem. It is good for certain parts of the problem space, but the overall broader part of that problem space, that long tail, if you will, has to be attacked using more sophisticated techniques. And AI is a powerful tool in this regard. So it's not just a situation where we're trying to apply AI just because it's a buzzword. It genuinely is the right tool for being able to do classification of behavior and transactions to identify whether or not those are malicious. And that's been a central focus for us. One of our key areas has been, however, applying AI in a much more horizontal fashion, not just looking at AI for point solutions in cybersecurity, but really building a holistic digital safety capability for families, cutting across all the things people care about, from secure networking to secure transactions to safeguarding all their messaging types of tools, for example, their email and their text messages and so on and so forth.
Speaking of the RockU 2024 breach, I mean, are there any recommendations or best practices for folks to prevent something like this from having a direct effect on them?
Yeah, so the simplest thing I recommend to everybody is to choose a high entropy password. I'm using the words very specifically here of entropy because ultimately what attackers try to do is when they're trying to brute force a password in general, the way they approach it is they try passwords that they think will make sense first. They don't just try to literally type in every character to see what would work. They often will start off with things that will be much more natural. So, for example, dictionary words plus a number, simple sequences of letters and numbers that are not complicated, pretty easy to guess. And they'll build up from there to try different kinds of passwords until they find ones that match what they think your password is. Now, if you choose a password that's complicated enough, and by complicated, I mean has high entropy, and there's different ways we can achieve that. The two ways you can achieve high entropy in a password are, number one, making the password longer. So typically, as the password becomes longer, the complexity of cracking that password, when one sees a hash of that password in a password file somewhere, is exponential in the length of that password. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second way you can make your passwords harder to crack and have higher entropy is to vary up the kinds of characters you use in your passwords. Rather than just using lowercase or just using uppercase, a combination of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, etc. helps a lot. A reason I mentioned both of those things is because many people often forget that this is really about making the password hard to determine and hard to figure out. And if you make the password longer, that's also a great way to do that. And sometimes a longer password can be easier to remember than a shorter one because you can base it off of a song lyric or maybe a quote that you know or a line in your favorite book. And based on that, you can come up with longer passwords that are harder to crack. So I think starting there, a lot of these problems would go away because it would be hard for anybody to achieve or identify your password purely from a hash of that password, which is how typical cyber criminals operate. So that's kind of the first big thing that I recommend to people. The second big thing is if you are using a site that offers two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, it's a great simple measure that gives you a step function increase in protection. So we highly recommend people to do that. And then, of course, in general, it's always good to take a holistic approach to dealing with all the different aspects of protecting yourself. So having things like identity theft protection, monitoring, doing dark web monitoring to identify whether or not your information is already on the dark web and updating your passwords accordingly, making sure that you have and do things like data broker opt-out so you don't end up in situations where the average person may get compromised. And of course, Aura does all of this for people, which is exciting. We have one free service, by the way, which I'd be remiss not to mention. If you go to aura.com/email scanner, we've got a free tool that will scan your inbox for scam messages. And in many cases, these breaches are rooted in somebody falling for like a phishing attack somewhere. And so if we can identify scam emails in your inbox, we can prevent you from inadvertently giving your credentials and sensitive information away to threat actors.
That's Dr. Zulfikar Ramzan, Chief Scientist at Aura. And finally, you may recall that about a month ago, stories were circulating that the NSA had discovered archival videotapes of a presentation given by Admiral Hopper in 1982, titled Future Possibilities: Data, Hardware, Software, and People. A true pioneer and trailblazer, Admiral Hopper was known for her dry wit and compelling storytelling abilities. NSA claimed they didn't have the necessary equipment to transfer the old 1-inch reels of analog videotape, but countless video archivists offered up their services. In the end, it's unclear who handled the transfer, but the good news is that the lecture is now available on YouTube, and needless to say, it's worth your time. We'll have a link in the show notes. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Don't forget to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with Tim Peck, Senior Threat Researcher at Securonics. We're discussing their work. Threat actors behind the Dev Popper campaign have retooled and are continuing to target software developers via social engineering. That's Research Saturday. Check it out. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K CyberWire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Keltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. This September 18th and 19th in Denver, a tight community of leading experts is gathering to tackle the toughest cybersecurity challenges we face. It's happening at MWise, the unique conference built by practitioners for practitioners. Brought to you by Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud, MWise features one-to-one access with industry experts and fresh insights into the topics that matter most, right now, to frontline practitioners. Register early and save at mwise.io/cyberwire. That's mwise.io/cyberwire.